Hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. If you do like the programming you see here and the musicians and artists that I visit with, please be sure and hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel. Bruce Woolley is an English musician, singer, songwriter, and producer. Bruce co-wrote the songs Video Killed the Radio Star, which became a hit for the Buggles, and Slave to the Rhythm for Grace Jones. In 1979, he formed the Camera Club. Original members would include Bruce on lead vocals, Thomas Dolby on keyboards, bassist Matthew Seligman, guitarist Dave Birch, and Rod Johnson on drums. From the period 1979 to 1983, the band would release several singles and the album English Garden. There was a second album that went unreleased at the time, but finally saw the light of day last October on a compilation of unreleased songs. Bruce's songs have been covered by artists like Grace Jones, John Farnham, Shirley Bassey, Cliff Richard, Tom Jones, and Cher, to name a few. In 1994, he helped found the Radio Science Orchestra with a special emphasis on the theremin. Today, my guest is working on transmedia projects that hopefully we'll hear about in a bit. Well, welcome, Bruce.
Hello, Greg. Thanks very much for inviting me on the show.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
Oh, I was born just near a small village called Shepshed near Loughborough, which is a university town in the Midlands in England, and brought up in Loughborough, in the Loughborough area, and that's where I kind of grew up till I was about, I guess about 21, 22. And then I realized that I really did need to move away from that environment if I was going to do anything with the music. So yeah, it was quite a sleepy place, you know, quite working class, as we'd say over here. And I guess I was actually very happy there. And I go back and it's delightful. But I do sometimes rather unfairly call it the land that time forgot. Because I go back and it's just like the 70s, you know.
Is that right?
Things haven't changed very much. In certain ways, which of course is rather nice. It's rather nice.
Yeah, I think so too, you know. Well, was there music in the household early on?
Yes, my father was extremely musical, and he was a jazz musician himself, and he played clarinet in the sort of New Orleans jazz style.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've ever heard of an artist called Ivor Bilk.
Yes, I have. Yes,
yeah. Well, Ivor Bilk was a family friend, actually, and he was also a rival New Orleans clarinet player.
Is that right?
He'd visit the house, and my mother famously dines out by saying that Ivor Bilk slept in her bed, but then hastens to add, not while she was in it.
not while she was there. Oh, that's
so. But like that. So there was a lot of jazz in the house, and you know, I was subjected, I guess is the word, because it used to wake me up at night. And I woke up one night actually and went into the dining room, into the living area, and there was literally a whole band set up in the house. And it was only a small bungalow, so that was quite a vivid memory, seeing a huge bass drum, you know, so I was probably about 3 or 4 years old. And so, yeah, from an early age, I heard a lot of jazz, not just trad, but a lot of blues. And then later on, my father introduced me to sort of way out stuff like people like John McLaughlin and John Sermon. He was a jazz saxophonist. So yeah, I guess that was quite an eclectic mix, because he also brought the Beatles. He'd buy the Beatles records. I couldn't afford to buy records, and he'd say, bring the Beatles records home as well. And he was a big Beatles fan.
Back to Ivor Bilk. I still have "Stranger on the Shore." That's
what a beautiful piece! What a beautiful track.
It is. It really is. But go ahead. I just want to interject.
No. It you know, I listened to that, and the thing is, it's strange because Ivor and my father sounded very similar, and Ivor went on to be very successful. My father had actually been offered the same contract. So my father was actually offered a recording contract, but his father forbade him to accept it because at the time he was working for the family business, which was a hosiery factory.
Okay.
And it's really sad because my dad would have, loved to have been a professional musician, never really got the opportunity.
Right, right. Another one that I think of is Kenny Ball as well.
Well, Kenny Ball, there was Ken Collier, there was a sort of group of these guys, Humphrey Littleton. I'm surprised that you've heard of Kenny Ball, actually. Did he
Yes,
have hits in America?
he did actually. Uh,
Yeah.
I, I was thinking, I was looking real quick at, I can't recall the name of it, but he had Midnight in Moscow.
Oh,
Yes,
yes, yes, yes.
yes,
Well, people forget that, well, particularly in England, I mean, trad was the kind of pop music of the day. The kids or the sort of students and teenagers, I guess, a
yes,
certain type would flock to these trad gigs. It's trad dad, it was really very cool. Certainly, in the late 50s, early 60s, and in fact, one of my father's friends used to play at the Cavern in Liverpool.
right.
And they trad was big. It was Lonnie Donegan was a sort of kind of
Donegan, yes,
brick, taking skiffle, and
yes,
so there was a really British scene of music. Then I remember my father's friend Ron Pratt. He said, "Oh yeah, we saw this group or something. And they came in and they made this terrible noise, And of course, it was the Beatles. And at the
right,
time, in their early days, they
right,
weren't that good, and the music must have been very abrasive, especially if you were going to go wanted to listen to Midnight in Moscow.
right, right.
And you hear,
I just watched that. I don't know if it's come on TV there, Netflix or Amazon, but the Led Zeppelin. Uh,
oh, I've not seen it. I'm
yeah,
really waiting to see this. Yeah,
I won't tell you much about it, but they do
do.
refer to Lonnie Donegan. It's an early influence. Especially Jimmy talking about
Yeah.
yeah those early ones and
It's funny because Jimmy Page, you see, again, there's this incredible transition between sort of pre-Beatles and then the Beatles and that early 60s. I listened to a station over here called Boom Light. Boom is a trilogy of stations over here for people disenfranchised with the BBC's Radio 2, which is meant to be for older listeners. But
yes,
Radio 2 thinks it's a really hip station. It is a hip station, actually. It's sort of down with the kids. So
okay,
it leaves out a lot of people, say, of a certain demographic. That don't want to. I don't really want to listen to rap, for example. And I accept this as a dividing line, although
yeah,
I do like to stay in tune with contemporary music. But what am I trying to say? So Boom has set up Boom Light, Boom, and Boom Rock. Boom as in baby boomer. And
ah,
I listen to all three of these stations. It's really fascinating. When you listen to Boom Light, it's sort of pre-rock and roll, certainly
oh,
Beatles.
yeah,
And you forget again how sort of tame pop music was.
yes, yes,
There weren't the outlets for it in England either. So when the Beatles came along, the BBC had to radically change its entire system, really,
yes, right.
and in response to the pirate radio stations as well.
I
But
like a
the point
lot of
was
that. Oh, go
Jimmy
ahead.
Page was
Yeah,
in that
yeah,
pre-era, and
yes,
he sort of stepped over into, I suppose,
yes,
almost the modern era where rock music has now become fully accepted as an
right.
art form.
Yeah, I like a lot of that early light music, what they call light music.
Well,
Yeah,
that's it. I mean,
yes,
it's
yes,
called Moonlight, and it was the BBC in those days had, I think it was called the Light Program. That
yes,
was their main sort of pop station.
yes,
They had the third program, and they had the home service. So the Light program was the pop station. The third program was classical, and the home service was a kind of spoken word, slightly more intellectual, top contemporary topics and so forth, cooking
yeah.
programs, this sort of
Oh,
thing.
okay. Okay.
and political discussion. So when the BBC realized that nobody was listening to the light program, the kids weren't listening to, that's for sure.
Yes.
Because it would play light music, as you said, Housewife's Choice, or sort of Sparky's
Yes.
Magic Piano, or The
Yes.
Laughing Policeman, the sort of
Yes. The laughing.
uh, with no regard for the teenage population whatsoever.
Right.
So they revamped everything. The government closed down the pirate stations, which were all illegal, and
Yes.
the BBC invented Radio 1 as a pop station. The light program became Radio 2. The third program conveniently became Radio 3, and the home service became Radio 4. And that's how it remains to this day. They've
Yes.
added 5 and 6, which is 6 is a very cool.
What was the first musical instrument you learned to play?
I think I actually tried playing the clarinet, but quite unsuccessfully. I think the guitar and the piano simultaneously drew me towards them, and I didn't really initially think I'd be particularly good at either. And uh, I had an acoustic guitar for a little while, and then the turning point was probably encountering an electric guitar in a room with somebody playing it. It was one of the boarders at school, because we had a school where some kids stayed in the school and they weren't allowed to go home, and only at the end of term, and other boys were day boys like myself. And anyway, these two boarders had electric guitars, and I went into their common room and just heard them play, and it was just great. It was just like, wow, such a great sound, so loud, and sort of uncompromising. One of
Yeah.
them had a bass, and the other had a kind of electric 6-string lead guitar, and it was distorted. It just grabbed me, it just grabbed me. And shortly after that, I bought an electric guitar off one of the other boarders who'd bought it and had abandoned it, and
Yeah.
got the whole thing, I think, for about £10. I think he sold me the amp and the guitar, which was a Futurama, a kind of sort of very poor Stratocaster copy, not dissimilar to Hank Marvin's first, the red Strat sort of thing. Anyway, so that was the starting point, really.
Okay.
Yeah, I played piano along the way. I found I could be more versatile with chords on the piano.
Okay.
Just
And
somehow, you can just go anywhere more easily. Whereas with the guitar, you've got to contort your fingers into different shapes,
right. Exactly.
and you
And
really
it,
have to
and
look
it
at.
has a lot to do with the size of your fingers too.
Yes,
I've
it
heard that
does,
too.
and the action on the guitar.
Right.
Are you a musician, Greg, yourself?
No, I'm not. But just doing these interviews, I've heard that come up.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. People,
You're a fan.
with longer fingers, and then the ones with the shorter fingers, they can't get it around the. Yeah. So, I've heard that come up. Yeah. Well. Can you remember the first single or album that you got yourself that you bought?
Well, I mean, the first album. Actually, I don't. I'm trying to think. Well, the first significant single, I say significant because I think when I was a kid, I think I actually did buy The Laughing Policeman. But uh, Sonny and Cher's I Got You, Babe, I think was my first serious purchase.
Oh,
And I think I got a feeling my first album, because I didn't have any money at all. I mean, I wasn't wealthy as a child at all. And I didn't, so to buy a record was a major commitment. And I think it was an album called Nice Enough to Eat, which was the very first sampler, which was from Island Records, and it was sort of half price, if not, well, very, very reduced in price. And each track was a song from another island artist's album. So you could buy this. It's like a first compilation album, actually.
yes.
And on it was 21st Century Schizoid Man by King Crimson.
Right.
And when I heard that, and it was great because the album, I think Nick Drake was on it, there was probably a Jethro Tull track, so this was a real gem of an album.
Yes.
That introduced me to a whole load of stuff. It
Yeah.
kind of introduced me to prog. Um, Actually, my very first exposure to what you might call progressive music was my father woke me up one night. I was asleep, and to see the moon landing. So
Yes.
that was that. I'm trying to think. Well, that was. I mean,
69, 60. Yeah.
69. That was
Yeah. Yeah.
as he woke me up, but
Right.
he insisted that because it was in the middle of the night in England,
Yeah.
and it's not the sort of thing I would have thought I would end up watching. But he
Yeah.
got me out of bed. He said, "Look, you've got to come and see this." I felt, "Oh, Dad, for God's sake, So I went in and we watched the moon landing. But before it happened, he'd woke me up. He said, "Look, get ready. You're going to see this." And I went into the kitchen and I listened to Radio Luxembourg, which was a kind of pop station. And they were playing completely different music to the pop music that they would play before sort of midnight or that the
Yeah.
Pirates were playing. This is 69, yeah. So that again was actually I've come to, and now I think about it, it was that was like opening a window really to another world. So
I have a story that kind of
do
puts it in context. The year 69. Um, I was listening to my little transistor radio, and I would do that
yeah,
in my bed at night. And of course, my parents would come in. I can hear that. Turn it down, or turn it off. Not turn it down. Turn it off. And then I
yeah.
would just turn it down a little bit more so I could hear it, under the pillow. And then eventually they would stop harassing me. But I remember hearing "Leaving on a Jet Plane," Peter, Paul, and Mary, and
What
then
a song.
also the George Harrison track from the Beatles.
Oh, you mean something?
Something. Yeah, I remember hearing those two in particular. Yeah. So
Just I know we sound I don't know how to put this. I sometimes think I sound like an old git, as we would say in England, because you think back to the kind of the skill and the mastery and the craftsmanship of a song like something, and
yes,
the way it was produced, the way it's played, the way it's performed, the team of people that were behind it. George Martin, he had Jeff Emerick or whoever it was engineering, and the whole of the Beatles, of course, themselves.
yes,
And it really is a golden age. You say "Leaving on a Jet Plane," beautiful three-part harmonies from Peter, Paul, and Mary, and a beautiful song, and so atmospheric. And I think that we've sadly just lost Brian Wilson, who was probably right there at the golden age, the use of the recording studio, as I say, all the skill and craftsmanship that is probably being lost now because everything's been so democratized. But there's still no excuse for not being able to write, decent songs. I mean, unfortunately I don't know what's number one at the moment in the UK charts or the American charts, and I wonder how much of contemporary music will be remembered in 50 years' time in the way which we're perhaps romanticizing it, admittedly, but
yes,
nevertheless, it's an objective fact that these were fantastically memorable pieces of music, which
yes.
we don't seem to get as much of these days.
No,
That's
we
all
don't. No,
I'm
we don't. Well said. Well said.
saying.
I don't think so. And with the voice modulation and things like that they do, and now they're even moving in an AI direction. It's
Well,
definitely not.
that's
It's
that it, yeah, I mean, that is another thing. Mind you, I mean, maybe purists might have said that about the Beatles. I mean, if you say listening to a Cole Porter song and then you put,
right.
Pepper or something, and wow, this
Yes.
is a bit way out, isn't it? But that was technology, wasn't it?
Yes.
Discovering the technology.
Yes, exactly. And again, when you watch that Zeppelin thing about Jimmy Page and all the things that he did and experimented with, in the recording of their early music, especially. Yeah. And
Yes, we were talking about him, weren't we? And he we were saying how he bridged the gap between the light program and heavy rock because
yeah,
he played a lot of sessions. I think he played on "It's Not Unusual" by Tom Jones, amongst other
I
things.
believe he did. Yes. He
Yeah,
played a whole lot of sessions. Yes.
loads of sessions.
Yeah.
Uh, and pop trivia, actually. Mike Hurst, who was in the Springfields
Yes.
with Dusty Springfield, when he left the Springfields, he formed a band, and his guitarist was Jimmy Page. So there you
Jimmy, that's right.
go.
Yeah.
Fabulous pop trivia.
Yeah. Another big session musician, Big Jim Sullivan, was
Oh
another.
yeah. I never met him, but yeah.
Yeah, he played. Well, what were some other early musical influences for you in bands?
Uh, Zeppelin Zeppelin was the one that propelled me to think I could actually do this. Oh no, I want to do music. I want to do music as my job.
Yeah.
That's so something happened with Led Zeppelin that made me think that. And I went about it in a rather haphazard way. I played a lot of pop music to earn a living. And songs like Tie a Yellow Ribbon Round the Old Oak Tree,
Yeah.
Sweet Caroline, things like The Air That I Breathe by the Hollies, which is the first time I learned how to sing vocal harmony with an Irish working men's club band. This sort of there's really good experience for me, and I got a job in a nightclub where we played a lot of ABBA, so I was
Oh,
super informed with
yes.
pop music. But
Yes.
my father had sort of also planted a bit of a seed with the John McLaughlin album, which was before Mahavishnu, by the way. It was a record he'd recorded on John Peel's Dandelion label called Extrapolation. And this really captured my imagination. And I was extremely egotistical as a guitarist. So I wanted to be a lead guitarist. Everybody wanted to be a lead.
Right.
And now here's the thing, because last night I had the great opportunity to go and see Billy Cobham play. Billy Cobham made an album called Spectrum, and he was playing at Ronnie Scott's last night with a band called the Guy Barker Big Band. Guy Barker's a very famous jazz trumpeter over here. And it was a phenomenal session. And Billy Cobham, I have to say, is just a brilliant drummer. Anyway, he said, "Look, at the end, we're going to. I've got some books to sell. I'll happily sign it for you." It's a little club, Ronnie Scott's legendary. But
Oh,
I thought,
this.
oh, yeah, I'd really like to meet. I want to meet. I want to get the book. So I queued up because I absolutely hero worship this guy.
Yeah.
And and first of all, they'd sold out of books, so there were no books. So
Oh,
and he was sitting down, and I shook his hand. I said, "Hi, Billy. I'm Bruce Woolley. And I love your album Spectrum." And when you meet somebody really famous and you make a complete idiot of yourself. And I said, and I had this story planned. I was going to tell him I used to be into jazz rock as a player. I said, yeah, I'm a failed jazz rock guitarist. And before I could go on to say, but then I got into songwriting and then I did this, he just
Yeah.
looked at me with like pity in his eyes,
Oh
and
no.
said, "Oh, I'm sorry, man."
Had,
And
had
I
he
never
heard
got
had
to
he
tell
heard of
him that.
you? Had he heard of you? Did he know you?
No, no, no.
Oh,
I sort of blurted something about Grace Jones, and then somebody else had to see him. So that was all a bit
okay.
kind of what you might call a leveler.
Yeah.
But the
Okay,
point
right.
being is that I just wasn't good enough to be John McLaughlin,
Okay. Okay. All
and
right.
I graduated into pop music
Okay.
because I could see a way forward. It was within my capability.
Okay. Well, going back, maybe this is going backtracking a little bit. Who was Ivor Kenny?
Oh, Ivor Kenny, he was like an old school um uh a band leader.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, he was a band leader. So when I first joined the Leicester Palais, which is my first real pro gig, um, there was a big band. Like I'm talking Glenn Miller size, quite a large band of saxes, trumpets, all woodwind, the usual. And I was the guitarist, and bass drums. It was a terrific sound, but it only lasted a few weeks after I joined. Not because I joined, but it was the end of an era. I went in right at the end of the big band era.
Right, right.
And Ivor did a very stripped down group so that we could play the pop hits of the day. It was quite analog. He would, every Tuesday, the charts would come out, and he'd rush out to the local record shop and buy several copies of three of the new entries or what was doing well in the charts and post them to us. So we'd get them by Wednesday, and we would then rehearse. We'd listen to them and practice them that day. And we would be then by the weekend we'd be have all these three brand new totally current pop songs, which were in the charts on the Thursday, which was top of the pops, you know. So that was the method, very analog.
Okay. You guys had
And
time to work those up. Yeah, yeah.
I learned a lot playing with them. It was phenomenal,
Okay.
actually. It
Well,
only lasted about a year.
only about a year. Well, how did you secure a publishing contract with Everblue Music?
Well, the thing is, what was so good about playing with Ivor Kenny was that in the evenings I performed and so forth. It was quite late nights, but it left my days completely free, and I was able to buy a Revox tape machine, which allowed me to make demos of the pop songs I was trying to write. And so during the course of the year that I was with Ivor, I made quite a collection of little pop songs, and we'd make cassettes and reel-to-reel tapes and send them around. And eventually, Everblue Music got to hear these and basically offered me a writing contract, you know, and that was it, really. It was pure luck. But I say luck, I was sending tape after tape, knocking on doors, really pushing. I was really proactive. And that was the point when he said that, and somebody said to me that, you know, you won't make it in Loughborough. You know, if you stick around in Loughborough, it's not going to happen. You've got to move to London.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the best advice that I had, because it
Back in
was
those
true. In
days,
those days, you had
yeah,
to be
you had
there.
to go to London. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that was like you said, it wasn't all luck, but it was kind of where timing and luck kind of converged. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they, yes, exactly. So you do have to push. I think,
yeah,
and I think about kids these days and breaking through the making some noise in the current climate must be very difficult. It's always been difficult. It's never been easy.
but not
Because
like today. Not like today.
there's so much music now
Right,
that its role has changed, I think, in society.
right.
Commercial music, well, again, I don't want to, I'm not complaining or lamenting necessarily, but again, it's a fact that, when I started, there were perhaps 200 singles a week being released. Now it's something like, and this is obviously globally, but 100,000 new tracks every day coming up on Spotify.
Right,
Something
right.
like that, isn't it?
Yes, it's a lot. The market's been
I mean,
flooded. It's
that's such
flooded.
a lot, though, isn't it?
Yes, it's flooded. And it's almost like a flip-flop, from back in those days, put out an album and then you went on tour to promote it, and today it's almost backwards, to that,
Well, I think musicians who want to be success, well, not success, but I think if you want to remain relevant, if you like, you've got to be in the public eye pretty much all the time. You have to now provide content, as it's called. Don't
right.
you? I mean, you do. You've got, if you
Yeah.
want to keep them, if you sort of drop off the radar, which incidentally I just did for the last 2 or 3 months. I haven't gone on Facebook. I haven't done anything. I just decided I needed to step back slightly. I'm now just about to approach the second phase of my promotion um, for my anthology, for my work, and I'm getting ready mentally for what that's going to involve. And I don't know, but certainly if you're a young artist starting out now, you cannot afford to disappear. You've got to be there all the time.
Yeah.
Um, perhaps I'm lucky that, okay, I've done a little bit and maybe I can just step back for a while and that's okay. That's all right. But if I'm going to do something new again, then I know what's involved. I'm preparing myself for it.
Right, right. It's a different approach these days. You're right.
Completely different. Yeah, yeah.
Well, your first single was "Dancing with Dr. Bop" for for
Oh my
Australian
word, you have done your research.
Australian group,
I am very impressed.
the Studs. Now I'd never heard of the Studs before.
Yeah. Well, again, this is the dark days of ever blue music. In those days, we would make demos, and incidentally, Trevor Horn was the house producer at this publishing company, and that's how I really met him, got to know him. But actually, he wasn't involved in that track. I wrote it with a girl called Jan Pulsford, and we just did a demo, quite a good demo, actually. I listened back. It had real brass on it, so we had
Oh,
some real players. It was very effective. It was very commercial, and anyway, we sent it off into the post, into the ether, really. And then months later, Alex Everett, who was the head of the publishing company, said, hey, you know, guess what? You're number one in Australia. And but then it was so far away. There was no internet. There's no way of verifying whether
yes.
this was the case, other than literally phoning up Australia. And I didn't know anyone in Australia. And phoning Australia in those days was prohibitively expensive. I mean, it would have
Yes.
cost hundreds of pounds for the phone call.
And plus with the time difference, you had to really
Yes,
be good at math, you know.
yeah, exactly. So it was, well, that's not going to happen, is it? So,
Yeah.
but it did turn out that apparently later on, only recently, I found that it was number one, I think, in some territories. They have a territory system, at least they did at the time.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, typically this here we are. I had a number one single, my first hit. I never received a single penny in royalties, you know. And again, this is one of the things everyone needs to watch out for going into the music business is what you sign. I mean, this contract with Everblue, I mean, you know, shocking.
Exactly. Yeah, publishing rights is everything. Yes.
Yeah, very important.
Very
And
important.
it's a long tail as well, you know, it goes on, it carries on.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about how you first met Trevor and Jeff.
Well, I first met Trevor, funnily enough, in Ivor Kenny's band because he was depping, as they call it. You know, what does dep
What's
stand
that? What's
for?
that?
You know, you he stands in for the bass player.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He stood next to me on the stage, and I wasn't a very good reader. I'd blagged my way into the band on the basis I would learn to read music, which I never really did actually. But Trevor, on the other hand, was an accomplished sight reader, and he just sort of put on the funny jacket, which we all had to wear these funny ice cream salesman shirts.
I know what you're talking about.
You know, and he was
Yeah.
next to me, and I just watched him, and he was just like doing just literally sight reading it, songs he'd never played before. And I didn't get to talk to him much then, but I met him later, and we got on. He was very nice. He'd heard my very first demo that I'd made. And he said he quite liked it, you know, and I thought, oh, that's nice. But you see, in those days, he wasn't Trevor Horn. He was I think somebody called him Trevor Doom because he was so. Uh, Trevor, if you're listening, I'm sure you don't mind me saying this, but he used to drink quite a lot and then get into arguments with the other musicians in the band, you know, and say things like, you know, this is a musician's graveyard, you know, you're never going to do anything. So this didn't make him terribly popular
Doom and
at all
gloom.
times.
Yeah.
And he'd play slap bass, you know, like Stanley Clarke,
Oh
which you
yeah.
shouldn't do in a Mecca dance band. You know, there's
No.
no room for slap bass.
No.
He was
No.
a jazz rocker as well, so we had quite a lot in common. We got on really well, and we both moved down to London about the same time. And he introduced me to Jeff Downes.
Okay.
And that was really through the Tina Charles connection, because Tina Charles was again a successful singer. She'd had a #1 record in the UK. In fact, we used to perform her song in the Mecca band. So it's like I was sort of only a few steps away from Tina, and
Okay.
Jeff was her keyboard player. So that's how all that came together.
Okay. All right. That came together. Yeah, I was just looking, Tina, Love to Love. Love to
Yeah,
Love.
I Love to Love. Great
Yeah,
record.
yes, I love to love. Yeah, it is. It is. I knew that rang a bell there too. Well, uh, Baby Blue, co-written by you, Trevor, Jeff. Was that your
Yeah.
first song writing together?
Yeah, and it was our first English hit, I think, actually. And I
Okay.
guess looking back, I never quite understood how Dusty had got that track, but I think it was through Mike Hurst, of whom we spoke earlier. He was
Right.
my manager at the time and record producer. He produced English Garden.
Yeah.
He'd
Yes.
had a string of, he had some a sort of almost a Guinness Book of Records, something like 50 hit singles, as a producer, which was
Yes, it did.
quite impressive. And I think he helped us get that cover, actually.
Oh, did he? Okay. Well, knowing Dusty, being in the
Mm,
Springfields together.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
How was it having that voice and that talent singing your song?
Oh
Dusty.
dear. If I'm truthful, I was disappointed.
Oh,
I mean, obviously, Dusty does your single,
yeah.
fabulous, but this is one of these situations, Greg, where the demo that we'd made, our version, was better than the version that Dusty did. I know that sounds a bit sacrilegious. And by the
Okay.
way, I can now listen to her version and enjoy it much, much more.
Okay.
And this is such a great honor that she sang. Wow,
Right.
I wrote a song
But
for Dusty Springfield.
but it wasn't what you envisioned.
Legit.
It wasn't what you
But
envisioned.
it wasn't what I was
Yeah.
expecting or
Yeah.
hoped for.
Right.
And one day, perhaps, um, I'm working on the concept of possibly putting out a compilation of music that people haven't heard, like demos or other versions of songs, and a sort of a different type of anthology. And I'd put that demo of Baby Blue on there very, forthrightly. I'd say, look, this has got to go on. So
So there are quite a few of those tracks still in the vaults. Huh?
absolutely, yeah. I
Yeah.
think you ask any musician, there are tracks in the vaults.
Do you know the combination?
Very good.
To get into well, well, you had actually helped to form the Buggles with Trevor and Jeff prior to Camera Club. Is that right? Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean,
Like a couple of years.
well, again, back to Tina was instrumental in this. Tina Charles. She was very wealthy. She'd made a lot of money and she'd invested very wisely. We were all still broke. I mean, when literally living from hand to mouth, as they say. And Trevor and I were in a group with Jeff, but we split up, like groups do. I went my way, they went theirs. But Trevor and I continued to write together. And one day we hit upon a song called Clean Clean, which is
Yes.
our first song that we'd ever written properly, I think. In fact, that song all came out a bit garbled. Trevor and I wrote Clean Clean initially, and then later we formed a group, that's right. And then we split up, but continued to write. And then while we'd split up, I was pursuing the my sort of solo career, and he and Jeff were going to carry on working together. He and I wrote Video Killed the Radio Star one day out of the blue.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And we thought, well, we both knew we were onto something, but we sort of agreed that, well, I'll do a version, my own version, but you guys do your version, but I'll come and help you put it together. So,
Right.
so in a way, I went down to the studio, and Tina, incidentally, had agreed to pay for the studio time to record this song because she'd heard the song. Trevor had played it to her, a sort of rough Revox demo version. So Tina financed the recording session, which was to become the Buggles. And it was me and Tina, Jeff, and Trevor, and we had a drummer. But originally, for example, when it came to doing the O were O, we'd
Yes.
got a kind of I got a sort of new wave. It would go um, oh oh, well, sort of like oh oh, like that, more like a kind of Clash punk, post-punk kind of sound,
Yeah.
more new wave.
New wave. Okay.
But Tina suggested doing it in the girly voice, so she did. They said, "Oh, oh." That was
Yeah.
Tina doing that.
That
And
was
when
her.
it came to singing the chorus, she suggested we did it in American accents,
Oh,
so
okay.
that it was like video kill the radio. This was all Tina's invention,
Uh,
actually, and she paid for the session.
did she? Okay.
Yeah, the whole thing. And so, we owe her this incredible debt of gratitude. By the way, I talk to Tina from time to time, and she's fabulous. She's marvelous because we all went on the road together. Um, and yeah, so that's how that happened. That's how it came about. With that demo that Tina had paid for, Jeff and Trevor then went to do the rounds, and they got offered a deal. Unfortunately, Tina prevented them from using those tapes because there was a little bit of a falling out. I think she wanted Jeff and Trevor to sign to her. And again, this is all fairly common knowledge. And they didn't want to. They wanted to sign to Island Records. So at that point, Tina said, "Well, look, you can't use the tapes." So it meant that, but they'd been offered the deal, and they were then left with the unenviable task of reproducing the demos that we'd made. And believe you me, that's not an easy task because to get that magic of the demo, like Baby Blue,
Yeah.
it's very, very hard. It's very
Right.
hard. That they got
Like,
really close, and in fact made probably ultimately it was a better record, and the song by then had undergone a few improvements, largely actually due to the Camera Club doing its own version and Trevor Singer's doing it live. And we'd introduced a sort of coda thing at the end of the song, which kind of finished it all off rather nicely. So he was at the gig and he said, apparently he goes on record as saying, I'll have that, he said. So he went back into
yes.
the studio and copied our ending for the
Oh,
Buggles
oh,
version. So
yes.
he got the best of both worlds there.
Best of both. Best of both. Well,
Uh,
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go
no,
ahead.
no, no. So they came out with this insanely commercial version of the song. We
Yeah.
did our version. It was okay, but it wasn't. It
Yeah.
wasn't quite as commercial.
Well, that's what I was going to when we got to that point. Ask you about why you think your song didn't do as well as
Well,
others. Yeah.
lots of reasons. I mean, the production wasn't. I listen back to it now, and I sort of. I've been listening to a lot of the music I did many years ago and having to reassess it, having to remix it in some cases, or mix it even for the first time. And I'm sort of I'm much older now, and I think Alison Moyet said something like pop people sort of are presented with pop stardom, if you like, just at the wrong time of their lives because they're just not ready for it.
Not ready for
Very,
it.
it sort of comes at the
Yeah.
time of your life when you probably least need it in a way, or at
Yeah.
least capable of dealing with it, I should say.
Yes. Yes.
And the reason I say that is because if I can look back now and think, oh, you
you know,
idiot, why?
that's
Why?
that's what I tell people. Doing this is like, wouldn't it have been something if you could have grown up backwards? Like
Yeah,
learned
grown up.
all of the business side of music, and
Uh-huh.
like be sure and get the publishing and all that before you
Hmm.
became a star, before you started doing it. Learn it backwards, but it doesn't. Life doesn't work that way. So like you
No,
said.
life is, but then that's life, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
um, to answer your question, why do I think it didn't do as well? I think it's fairly obvious when you play them back to back and you look at the market. And also, don't forget that video with Buggles wasn't really a hit in America at the time, but it gained notoriety 2 years later as the first record on MTV, as we know, and
No,
that's why it has a particular place in history.
exactly.
Some
exactly.
people are very kind and they say, you know what, I prefer the Camera Club version. And I can sort of see a reason for preferring it if you like that kind of music better than, say, something that's hyper commercial like the Buggles version, almost like a gimmick. It was like a gimmick record.
Yeah, yeah, it
And
was.
and that's its appeal. That's why it just struck that chord.
Yeah, but how prophetic the song was, like you said,
Mm.
you know, years before MTV, and that's what began to happen with MTV. You know, is the radio star was done in. You know, in
Well,
a lot of ways. Yeah,
again, you say that, but
yeah,
really, it didn't really kill the radio star. Video never killed the radio star. This is the whole thing, and it hasn't. And it's like when radio first came out,
Mhm.
there was a big resistance when it started to proliferate. I think the musicians' union was saying you can't play music on the radio because that means people will hear it for free.
Right.
And there was big resistance because they thought it would destroy their careers. Of course, the reverse happened.
Yeah.
Radio suddenly became the most amazing advertising medium for music.
Right.
So if you got on the radio, you'd sell more records. But
Yes, that's
nobody
true.
knew that until it actually happened.
There's always been a resistance to technology, you know, throughout history.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know, even from
Absolutely.
early, even from early on. Yes, you're right. Well, I see what you're saying there. You know, I think I like that. I like the song, and it rang true for me because I've always been the type that I like to hear the music and then get my, you know, my own impression of what I'm hearing and images in my own mind. And sometimes I don't want to say resent, but you know, that's too strong of a word. But somebody makes a video and says, "This is what you're supposed to
Oh, I
imagine,"
see. Yes.
you know,
Yes.
from that standpoint, you know, and not leaving it up to the imagination, you know.
Sure, I get that.
So
Yeah.
that's, you know, a little bit where I came from. But um, did you have another something you were going to say, or
No, I was just thinking about that because I think MTV was a great novelty, and also it satisfied a terrific need for teenagers whose apparently main favorite pastimes were watching television and listening to rock music. And MTV combined these two. And I
yes,
suppose now it's less about that. And at the time that was the only way you could consume a music and a visual together. It was in a long form video. And yeah, I know what you mean, that it takes away the imagination. And I think someone said they'd seen when Sledgehammer came out, you know, the track was great. And the guy said, I think it was Steve Nye, who was a record producer who produced David Sylvian and many other tracks. He said, I've just seen the best video that I've ever seen, which was a Sledgehammer. And I don't care if I never see it again, he said. Um, and it was starting to get like that. So I don't
right,
know. I love the track, but I don't want to watch that video again. Even,
right, right,
you
right.
know,
Exactly,
different
exactly.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. So anyway, that's what happened. And of course, like you said with MTV, I don't even know if they're still around, but it just went into all these crazy shows. It was less about the videos, you know,
Yeah.
more and
Well,
more, you know.
yeah, I think that's because YouTube obviously fulfills that function and it's on demand, whereas
Right.
uh, you know, it's a linear format, I think, MTV, and as you say, it's changed
Yeah.
considerably. And of course, now we have things like even quicker even more instant gratification in the form of, say, TikTok, for example. I don't know. I mean,
Right.
sadly, I'm addicted to TikTok.
Okay.
I don't know if you see it much, but it's
I know what you're talking. I've
you
seen
know
it.
what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess it's all of these social media platforms now have reels or whatever. They have these quick, you know, fixes of stuff.
Facebook. Yeah, it does too. Yeah. So
So
yeah.
you might be less inclined these days to sit through a whole music video, for
Right.
example.
And it's also like you said, immediate gratification has led to
Hmm.
you know people having shorter and shorter attention spans. You know,
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Where's that going to end? I mean, what does that mean? What
See,
does
I
it
don't
mean?
see. I don't know. I don't know. And so there's going to be a lot of people that won't watch, you know, a video like this of this length, you know, because of that. talk about forming the Camera Club. What was the idea behind the name, first of all?
Oh, that's good question actually. We were on the road already. I'd put this little unit together with my old school friend David Birch, who was a guitarist from the Vibrators. But I knew him at school, I went out with his sister. His brother actually is Rob Birch, Rob B, who is the lead singer of the Stereo MCs. Out of just a
Okay.
bit more trivia for you there,
Yeah.
the family connection. Anyway, cut a long story short, Dave and I had sort of put the group together, and we were on the road, and there was a sort of feeling from the band that they should have a name. It was sort of workers' uprising, really, because they were my backing band, and they were feeling a bit left out.
Yes.
So we were coincidentally all running around with cameras at the time, and I had a cine camera with sound, a sound 8mm cine camera for your younger viewers. That's like a video recorder
Yes.
using, but uses little sprocketed frames of film in a reel. Very, very old school. Anyways, and somebody said, oh, why don't we call ourselves the Camera Club? Because there was a camera club at school. Our art teacher, called Len Major, had this camera club, and it just seemed to resonate. It just seemed to work. And probably as well because we were singing a song about video, and there's a slightly futuristic, voyeuristic thing going on, and
Yes. Yes.
just yeah, it just seemed appropriate. And one of the guys in the band thought of it. I'm not sure who. It might have been Dave himself. Anyway, it was inspired, so we used it.
Okay.
And I'd be tempted to use it again, actually. I really,
Yeah. Yeah. It is
yeah.
kind of like you said, a kind of a futuristic,
It's got the
feel to
vibe,
it.
hasn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned talking about connections, right? And these common threads. You mentioned the vibrators.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
do you know who John Ellis? You know who John Ellis is?
That's not Knox? No,
Ellis, John Ellis.
I don't know him. No.
I have an upcoming chat with him. He was in Vibrators. He was in Bazooka Joe,
Okay. Yeah.
which was a pub rock band.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, okay, he toured with Peter Gabriel, his '84
Yes, I remember
tour,
the name very
and
well.
the Stranglers. He was in
Okay.
the later version of the Stranglers after Hugh
Okay.
Cornwell, left the band. So yeah,
Yeah.
that will be interesting. See there again. You hear like something that rings a bell. He goes, oh, okay, I know. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
somebody. So very interesting, very interesting. Well, talk about how you met Thomas Dolby. How did you guys?
Um, Well, we used to have a music paper, like a newspaper once a week called the Melody Maker.
Yes,
Um,
yes,
and one of the great things about the Melody Maker is it had a sort of like a Lonely Hearts Club
yes.
section at the back for musicians,
Right.
And
A
I
lonely
was
heart.
yeah, I was looking for really a songwriting partner, and he'd advertised himself, looking for musicians. It sounded like looking for a collaborative writing partnership rather than a band looking for a player. So we got in touch. I got in touch with him, and we got together, and we played each other some music and stuff, and had a very pleasant afternoon. Had a cup of tea in the afternoon, and but at the end of the conversation, we sort of agreed that we probably wouldn't work together.
Really?
Yeah, because it was like it was a bit like, well, we're both trying to do the same thing, aren't we? Sort of thing. We're
Uh,
rivals,
oh, okay.
and
Right. Competition.
uh, or something or other. But it was very amicable.
Yeah.
But then later on, with Dave and I formed the group, um, would become the Camera Club. We were thinking, well, it'd be great to get a keyboard player. But by then, I'd got a bit of access to some funds. So I thought, well, this guy was really good, Thomas Robertson was his name.
Okay.
And I thought, well, let's ring him up, get him down,
Yeah.
because we can pay him, you see. And he was cool with it. He thought, yeah, he'll go along with it because he could see we were kind of going to go somewhere. We were going to do something, and he wanted to come along for the ride, and he was going to get paid. and meanwhile he could plan his secret domination of the world,
Right, right.
from within.
Yeah,
And by the way, I'm on still really good terms with Thomas, and so he's a good lad.
yeah.
But that's how we met him initially.
Okay. So the Dolby, I always wondered about that. Was that because of the Dolby sound system? Is that why he chose that last name?
It's interesting. I know I've told this story perhaps one or two times. So anyone watching, please forgive any repetition. But Greg, if you want to know the answer to that question, Thomas, when I met him, was called Tom Robertson,
Yeah.
and of course, his friend was a guy called Tom Robinson, who was what does
The
it say?
band, Tom Robinson band?
Yeah, the Tom Robinson Band,
Yeah, yeah.
because they knew each other. They were both really ambitious, and they got together in a pub, a place called the Nashville, which is a famous pub rock. You mentioned Bazooka Joe, the pub rock scene,
Yeah.
and they together they had a drink and said, right, I'm called Tom Robinson, you're called Tom Robertson. Whoever becomes famous first, the other one has got to change their name. Tom
Right.
Robinson suddenly had this hit single.
Yeah.
So Tom, this is while we were rehearsing as the camera got literally, this is all happening in real time. And Tom Robertson came in to rehearsal the next day or a few days after this conversation, after it was revealed that Tom Robinson was in the charts, and he said, I'm going to change my name. And we
Okay.
said, oh yeah, I'm going to call myself Thomas Dolby. And we all went, you're kidding. We thought he was joking.
You did.
No, we actually thought he was joking,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he was deadly serious, and that was when the plot really thickened, I think, in his
Okay.
mind.
In his
And
mind.
of course, it worked great in the band as well.
Yeah.
Camera Club, Thomas Dolby, Video Killed Radio Star. It all resonated very well.
Right, right.
He actually, again, if Tom's listening, I think you've gone on record to tell this story where Thomas then subsequently had a lawsuit from Dolby Laboratories,
Okay.
Ray Dolby, the
Yeah,
boss,
yeah.
saying, "Look, you've appropriated my name, and there's a case here for brand, what's the word? Confusion, brand ambiguity." Um, Especially as Ray Dolby's son is called Thomas.
Oh, is that right?
It,
Okay.
that compounded it.
Yeah.
However, I think the happy ending is that they agreed to go their separate ways, i.e., no litigation, providing that Thomas Dolby doesn't release musical products or audio products, I should say. So I think that's all sorted now.
We'll sort it out.
Yeah.
Okay. All
So
right.
he gets to keep the name.
Yes, yes. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so and apparently it was his nickname at school as well. So
Oh,
that's why he changed it officially.
okay.
I
Okay.
hope that explains. That was rather long-winded, but you did
That's all
ask.
right. That's all right. I would, I would, I would love to, and I think I might have even reached out to Thomas about doing an interview. I would
You
love to talk.
should.
I would love to
Yeah.
talk with him. Well, how about Matthew Seligman? Uh,
Well, the late Matthew Seligman is
yes,
very
yes,
sad.
yes.
He was in a group called with Bobby Henry, which was a group on the Oval label run by a guy called Charlie Gillett, who was quite a mover and shaker in the music scene. And Charlie had recommended we go down and see the Bobby Henry because the bass player was really good, and we were looking for a bass player. So we went down and saw Matthew, and Dave and I said, "This guy's really good," and asked him to join the band, which he did. It was a bit complicated because he already had a bass player, a female bass player, who a girl called Marion Fudger, but she was the girlfriend of the drummer Richard Wernham. Richard Wernham at the time uh, was our drummer. He'd come from the Motors. You may remember the Motors.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
Motors.
so
Yeah.
more connections there. So
Yes, yes.
politically, it was all a bit awkward, and but just brushing that to one side, and I was a bit sorry the way we treated Marion, really, because in a way I mean, she was a really good person, and I was obsessed with technical prowess, and Matthew had that, and we had to make more allowances for Marion's playing.
Right.
Um, it was, I don't know, it was one of those things I often wonder could have turned out a better way, really. Uh,
Right.
and Matthew ended up not staying very long with the camera club.
Right. Right.
Um,
Went on to the Soft Boys. Yeah.
yes, that's right. Well, he was already, I think he was already playing with the Soft Boys
Okay.
as well. He went on to form the Thompson twins.
All right.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think he came up with the name as well.
Oh,
But
did he?
then he had problems with them. I think he finally settled really in a way with working with Thomas on his couple of his albums and being very much his right-hand man. That seemed to work quite well as a
Yeah.
partnership.
Right. Right.
And it's so sad because Matthew died of COVID. I think it was 2021, I forget exactly. Um, and he was a brilliant musician.
Yes. Yes. That is.
Yeah,
That is.
famously played bass at Live Aid with Bowie
Right.
and many sessions and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
You- yeah, great
Well,
guy. Miss
well,
him.
Matthew, yes, and a lot of fans as well miss him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Matthew, he did play on the English Garden album, right?
Yes, he did. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
He pretty much played all of that, I think. So it was a brief moment. Um, After the album came out, we went to tour America, and he left shortly before that,
Okay.
which was a pity. Um, but somehow Mike Hurst, the producer of whom we spoke earlier, somehow he managed to capture the camera club with Rod Johnson on drums and Matthew on bass, um, Thomas obviously, Dave on guitar, myself on vocals and a bit of guitar. And it was like, okay, snapshot, great. And we did the whole album, I think, in about 2 weeks.
Yes.
Uh, and so it's funny, isn't it? This music thing where people combinations that only occur once, and then
Right.
they get recorded. And I suppose that's why it's called a record, isn't it? Because it's
Right.
a moment in time.
It is. It's a record recording. Yes. I
Yeah.
think that's where it originated.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I think so too. Uh,
Hmm.
it's a good way to look at that.
Hmm.
Well, the album was released in '79, and then it contains original recordings of both Clean Clean and Video Killed Radio Stars. Video Star. Um,
That's
and,
right.
and, and again, like I said earlier, how prophetic that was video before MTV came out.
Well,
So,
also, it's more of an analogy about technology changing society. And we're seeing this very much now, I think, with the AI thing, which you mentioned earlier. So that's quite profound, I think. And it's the song video is based on a J.G. Ballard story about how technology will change music anyway, that music is more of a feeling rather than an audio experience. And music, in a way, has become quite cyclic. So it's very difficult for music to progress. Again, I don't want to sound like embittered old man, sort of thing, but it's like very hard now to make a new sounding record that doesn't sound like something else that you've already heard.
right,
That's what I'm
derivative.
trying to
Yeah.
say.
Yes. Yes.
Unless you're going to be completely avant-garde, and then you're going to likely lose the audience. But if you want to
Yeah. You
appeal,
will.
if
Yes.
you want to appeal to the man in the street, you've got to make it sound like something he can recognize.
Yes. Yes.
And so it may be that we've explored the possibilities so thoroughly that it's extremely difficult now, particularly if a band, let's say you've got a drummer, bass player, and a guitarist, there are only so many ways you can go with that.
Right. Right. You know what blows my mind is to think of all the songs in history, how there's only a certain number of chords,
Well,
on an
yes.
instrument. How were they not duplicated more often? You know what I mean?
Mm.
In a song. How can they vary so much to create that many songs?
Well, Yeah, I often wonder about this. Because really, I think I think there are enough combinations that I would hazard that it's infinite. What amazes me is that people can still come up with new song titles. That really,
That's another thing. Yes, yes,
after like a good 100 years of, I
right,
mean,
right,
I Only Have Eyes for You. I think it's almost 100 years old.
right.
You know,
And
what an amazing song.
right,
And so the popular music thing, which began, I suppose, with the Great American Songbook, I'm not sure where it begins.
yeah.
It's been going now for a long time, and you still get new titles.
New
That
time
amazes me.
and new lyrics and the lyrics too.
Exactly, new
Yeah,
lyrics.
yeah, yeah,
But then I suppose language evolves, sensibilities evolve, and you can always put a twist on something.
yeah.
So I'm not saying it's all been done at all. No, I'm just saying stylistically it's difficult to break new ground.
And not sound derivative or anything like
Quite
that.
so.
Exactly, exactly. Well, you mentioned a little bit ago about touring the album, the UK and the US. Do you remember any particular shows that stand out?
Uh,
Who did you
yes, I
support? Did you
do.
play?
I mean,
Did you play in
yeah,
support of another band or?
yeah. We supported the Kinks actually at one point, which was quite a thrill.
Okay,
And but I suppose my more vivid memories are coming to New York for the first time in 1979 and playing at the Mud Club, for example, which is like this legendary, I realize now, a legendary club. And it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I had seen Eraserhead by then, by David Lynch.
oh yes, yes.
Going into this club was like a bit like being in a David Lynch film.
I still
That
remember
was,
going to the movie to see that. I still.
yeah, that's a crazy
Oh,
film. Um, so there was some sort of connection, I think. I don't know if David Lynch used to go to the Mud Club. I don't know where he lived, but I would fully expected to have seen him in there. And so the New York club scene was an eye opener. We'd never seen anything like that before.
okay.
Um, and I think the overriding feeling was that it was such a buzz, so much energy, and the fact that all the songs as well that we played were very energetic. Everything was very fast, and so I just remember it being a kind of crazy scene, crazy people jumping around, especially with the pogo thing as well.
Right.
We played a gig at the Rock Garden in London, and I remember coming off. The audience was pogoing, and they also, this is rather unpleasant. They were gobbing, which means they were spitting at the artist as a sort of sign of affection.
Uh-huh.
And you come off stage covered with sort of, you know,
Kind of
debris.
yeah, a
Pretty
warped sense
unpleasant.
of
So I
yeah,
remember
yeah.
that. I remember things like that. But that was luckily that didn't happen very often.
Right, right.
But we all like what I do remember is that we had some just fantastic reactions from the audience, especially in America. It
Yeah.
was very exciting. And unfortunately, it was so action packed, if you like, that it sort of burnt out in the end. It burnt out very quickly. Um, but yeah, I guess I have an overall very fond memory. Although it did start to get a bit Spinal Tap, so
Did it?
that's inevitable, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
Any band on the road.
yeah. I wanted to comment about the cover. It's striking to me. Where was that a picture taken? Where was that photo
We're
taken?
talking about the American version of the hang on, I'm talking about this photograph here. Oh, you can't see it because it's blurred. No, no,
Uh,
no. It doesn't
no,
show up. Okay,
no,
we'll edit that bit out.
no, the other version, the other album cover where it's actually looks like a garden.
Oh, okay. You're talking about English Garden, the English version.
Yes, yes, the English version.
Yeah. No, that was taken in a place called Scion House, not far from Kew Gardens, actually. Well, it's that way. It's a sort of like a Kew Gardens style
I was gonna ask about Kew Gardens. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
no, it looks like people think it's Kew Gardens, but it's
It's not.
Scion House. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I like that photo on there. That's
Good,
yes,
good.
yes. Well, yeah, Thomas left the band in '82, and of course we know the rest is history. His career really took off at that point. And the band had recorded a second album, but CBS wouldn't release it. Why was that?
Um, well, probably the bottom line was that we never really had a hit single with the first album, and that in those days with that format, you really to sustain record company support, you have to have a hit single sooner or later. So they did finance more recordings, and it was almost like we'll wait for the hit single, and then we'll go to the trouble of releasing the album on the back of it. But because that never really happened, that's why a lot of tracks didn't get released. Because from the label's point of view, it's sort of it's cheaper really to record, but not to release, because promoting the record is the expensive bit, as well as recording costs themselves. But so, you know, really, that's why a lot of and this has happened to so many acts, is that they've recorded a huge amount of work that never gets released. So this is why our music was basically put into the archive for at least 40 years. And the along the over the years, there were also lots of legal ramifications regarding the nature of the contract that needed to be sorted out. And so I thought I took the long view, and it's like eventually 2 or 3 years ago, I came to a deal with Sony. After I had to get an American lawyer, by the way, to do this. And in the end, we sorted everything out. And then it's taken another 3, 4 years of overlaps to finally get these tracks out of the vaults, digitized. And incidentally, if you have a 2-inch tape, big tape, like a Man from Uncle,
Oh, yes, one of
computer,
those. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
those tapes don't play on you can get the old machines and you'll try and play it, and it'll stick to the heads, because the tape's degraded so much. So you have to put it in an oven for 4 days,
You have to
bake
bake.
it very slowly, and that reseals the tape, and then you can put it through the machine and you can digitize it. And so all of that, I suppose it's taken 43 years to do. We now finally, a few months ago, with Sony and Cherry Red working together, we've found all that material and put it together on a 3 CD box set, including some live tracks from the two tours that we were talking about earlier. And yeah, well, there you go. Thing
Okay.
is, at the moment, this is the only way you can hear the tracks.
Right,
So,
right.
but the plan is to get this material out on Spotify by the end of July. So at the moment, this is the end of Cherry Red's window of
Uh,
analog exclusive,
right.
albeit it's a CD. But so at the moment, really, very few people have heard this music. That's
Yes.
because really, it's very niche that we put this album together. It's a collector's item, really.
Right. Well, I'm a collector of music, so
Okay.
Cherry Red, I want to say is my go-to label for finding out about so many artists too, because
Okay. Well,
especially when
we'll
they.
send you a copy.
Oh, well, I appreciate that very much,
Yes.
Bruce. Yeah, I find out through a lot of their various artist compilations. I'll find out about bands that way too, you know. But another common thread here is talk about 40 years. Um, coming to fruition. A lot of the artists that I talked to, maybe back in the day, they flew under the radar for whatever reason, weren't real popular. But then with the advent of the internet, and then these guys, they call it crate diggers, that
Okay.
that
Yeah.
are looking for rare albums and things,
Hmm.
will find an album and then it will just start taking off from there. A lot of times it's in other countries, Germany, Spain, whatever, is they'll get, someone that will say, like, again, like 40 years later, would you like to release this? I can release it on my label. Is that okay? And a lot of these are just like dumbfounded, like, wow, really? There's actually still fans, and things like that, that they can't believe it. And then it just kind of, there's a resurgence of interest, that comes with that. So a lot of the guys that I talk to on here, are in that camp, for real. So I hear that story. I hear that story quite often, So, and the music, like I say, good music is going to travel. It will travel through time, and you're going to find new audience and new fans,
Oh, wow, that's nice. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. So, especially, with, video killed the radio star. People that research like I do, and they'll say, "Oh, wow, this is the original version," and then they're going to, look into it. Clean, clean. I like that Buggles version of that one too. Yeah, some of the, my favorite on that, the Buggles album is Miss Robot.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Good track.
I love you, Miss Robot. I like the funkiness of it, and the bass on it. Yeah, that's a nice one. So, well, real quickly here, let me see. I wanted to talk about. Have you heard anything, first of all, from fans or anyone on this release? Have you gotten some feedback?
I have actually, and it's been really heartwarming. I've had a lot of messengers through Facebook. Although my Facebook, I'm one of the things I'm going to do is to grow my Facebook artist page, because I think I'm up to my limit on my personal page, and this is something I intend to do over the next 12 months, is to look at working the socials a little bit more, because I've had some fabulous feedback from people, and people writing me letters. I've actually had to set up a post box so that if anyone wants to write to me, because I did have somebody turn up at the door once, who this guy, he said, "Hey, are you Bruce Woolley?" And this is some Sunday morning, Anyway, all he wanted was me to sign some records, which is lovely. And he'd come all the way from America. I think he'd got some other heavy rock band in his sights as well. He was going to surprise them. And the guy's name is Mike Walsh. And Mike, if you're listening, and that's I dine out on that story of you coming to my breakfast that Sunday, and I thought I had imagined the whole thing, but no, you're real, and you're welcome anytime. But
Yeah.
I have set up a post box now.
Now you did. You
Actually, if
learned.
you want paraphernalia, Greg, and stuff, I can send you some stuff for this if you want to post pictures or anything like that, or the post box or the contact for the album. And we'll talk later. Yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
Afterwards. Yeah.
We can do that. But you've over your career, you've penned songs for many artists. The pop duo Dollar. I found that interesting.
Oh yeah. They were already very well known in England. They were a successful pop duo, and they were a couple for a long time. And um, I forget. I think Teresa, the girl singer, she met Trevor on an airplane, and they were looking to do a new single. And she just asked him, "Would you produce a record for us?" And he just agreed. And then he came to me and said, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to produce Dollar. Let's write a song for them." So we did. We wrote Handheld and Black and White. That was the first one. And then we did Mirror Mirror, which again was a pretty big hit. And I think it got into the top 5 in the UK charts. They were great. It was great fun to work with. Really good. Yeah.
I always got them mixed up with Bucks Fizz.
Oh, yeah.
Bucks Fizz. Yeah.
Well,
Another pop.
they're coming out of a similar space. Yeah.
Yes.
I did work with Andy Hill, who created Bucks Fizz, actually, and he and I wrote a song for a guy called John Farnham.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
called
That was
Two
my next
Strong
one.
Hearts.
Yeah.
And that was good. That went really well. It was a big #1 in Australia again, but this time we knew about it. and I've seen some royalties for that one as well. But I think Olivia Newton-John and John Farnham did a duet of it, so it's a big song in Australia. And that was Andy Hill.
Yes.
Um,
Now, now,
great writer, great
now,
producer.
of course, Grace Jones, huge with Slave to the Rhythm. Now, that originally was meant for Frankie Goes to Hollywood, right?
It was indeed, and it was Chris Blackwell, the guy that created Island Records. We mentioned that earlier with the Nice Enough to Eat sampler. He wanted one more track for Grace and said to Trevor, "Look, this is a really good title. Can we adapt it for Grace?" So that's how that happened. That was his idea, and
Ah,
we ended up doing loads of versions because the first version wasn't quite there, and because we'd done so many versions, it was said that we'll turn it into an album.
oh,
So
okay.
really, the album "Slave to the Rhythm" is actually just a collection of the of the singles that didn't quite make it, but they are legitimately quite validly different in their own right. So I don't think it was a bad idea, actually.
Well, now Shirley Bassey did her own version of Slave to the Rhythm,
She
and
did.
talk about full circle. We talked about Jimmy Page earlier. He played on Goldfinger.
No, really.
Jimmy did, yeah. And it actually, when you watch the documentary, you'll see him playing on the video, and she looked so different back then.
Wow.
Yeah,
I never knew that. That's
yeah.
amazing.
Jimmy played on Goldfinger.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a little tidbit there.
Well,
But
I've learned something
yeah.
today.
Well, yeah. So quite a few. Cher, Tom Jones, Cliff Richard. You they all liked your material.
Yes,
Well,
it's good. It's sort of
yeah,
really apart from wanting to be a jazz rock guitarist, I really wanted to be a songwriter. And so when I look and see the list of people that have recorded the songs, I guess it's gratifying to a certain extent. But really, I think as all musicians and writers, they're really about what they're doing now and the next
yeah,
thing. And
yeah, yeah,
so the,
yeah,
the greatest thrill for me is I've got the piano here.
yeah, yeah.
It's like, oh, where could that take me? And you
Uh,
immediately you open up a new world.
yes,
I'm not
right.
going to get flash on the piano, but it's all there. All those notes are there. You were talking about. I mean, I think it's 12 notes, isn't it? Um, but no, not 12. It would be 11 because one of them's an octave. Uh, Yet with that piano, one can write any kind of music you want,
Yeah,
anything.
yeah,
And then working with lyricists, because I like to work with lyric writers. Again, it is infinite, and there's always that fabulous twist when somebody comes up with a line that's just right, and I've got the tune for it. That's what it's all
yeah.
about.
It's like a perfect match right there.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
That's what it's about. Well, you did some. There's a couple other things here that I wanted to talk about. You did some producing over the years. See if you remember this. Jar your memory. Do you remember producing some of the tracks for the Farmers Boys?
Oh, very much so, yes.
Okay, great. I talked to Mark Kingston.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Wow.
yes, he was in that. I could send you. I'll make a note too to send you that, so you don't have
Okay.
to scroll through it. Yeah, yeah, and
I'd
he
like
had,
to see that. Yeah.
right, right. So yeah, with these hands, that album, yeah, you had produced on that. So well, that's cool. That's cool. You reunited with Matthew in '94 to found the Radio Science Orchestra.
That's right. And this was for me, a renaissance because I'd become rather disillusioned with music I was sort of feeling a bit down about the whole CBS Sony thing where my music hadn't been released, and I um, I had to find ways of I don't know, surviving really, and sort of artistically, financially. I moved into producing a lot of music for commercials, And but around that time, I discovered the theremin,
Yeah.
which is an instrument you play without touching. You move your hands around like this, and it makes woo 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 sound. Very
Vibration.
difficult to play. But it's something around 93, seeing the Theramin documentary, hooking up with Matthew again. It was like I got reignited, really,
Yeah.
and thought,
Well,
well, I'll go back on stage again. I'll sing and perform with musicians again. And it was
right.
wonderful because I thought I might never do that again. So right up to this day now, we're still performing with the Radio Science Orchestra, although sadly Matthew's no longer with us, but he was an integral part of its foundation.
Right. Well, I was going to say, nice of you how you brought the use of the theremin to the forefront, kind of revitalized that instrument. And I'm sure there's still a lot of people out there who don't know what the instrument actually is.
Mm.
You know.
Well, I like to think I gave it a bit of a hand because you see, I knew
Yeah.
Bob Moog, and he was
Yeah.
always he was the guy that invented the Moog synthesizer, or
Right.
the Mini Moog as it was known. Originally, that was the first portable electronic synth, but
Yeah.
the theremin itself was the first portable electronic musical instrument. It's
Yeah.
not technically a synthesizer.
Right.
And Bob Moog learned his trade by building small theremins for
Yeah.
people. He also worked for a guy called Raymond Scott. And that's
Right.
now we're going down a different avenue now, but Raymond Scott was an electronic music pioneer in the 1950s and 60s. Um, anyway, I've digressed slightly. The theremin just fascinated me. It was like, oh my God, this is just incredible. And it still does.
Yeah.
But originally in the RSO, the Radio Science Orchestra, I used to be the main theremin player. But then I got two guests, Lydia Kavina, who is Leon Theramin's great niece, who's a virtuoso, and a guy called Charlie Draper, with whom I'm still working. And he's also one of the top, I suppose there are perhaps five top theremin players in the world, and Lydia and Charlie are among those top five in the world. I'm talking world class. So yeah, so I tend to step back a bit more now in sort of I defer to them. I say, come on, you do. They do all the difficult stuff.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I remember hearing that the theremin used in some sci-fi movies, uh, in particular the day the Earth stood still.
Yes.
Yes, it
Yeah,
features
that's amazing.
that eerie, that woo, kind of
Yeah. Yeah,
sound.
that's
So I
fantastic
would,
soundtrack.
yeah, and I think a lot of people, if they go back and listen and watch that movie, that they'll understand more what the sound is, where it comes from. But going back to Zeppelin again, they actually used it on a Whole Lot of Love and Jimmy and No Quarter. You can hear it more prominently in No Quarter, the
Yeah,
theremin.
I only found out about that later on
Yeah,
because I didn't know that. And it's incredible, isn't it?
yeah,
The whole lot of love, the build up to the guitar solo. It's
yes,
amazing.
right, right,
That changed my life, literally,
yeah,
literally.
right. Well, it'll leave you wanting more because it only goes up to like the second album, I believe. I was
Hmm.
hoping it would take them through, up to current days, or at least through their late
Okay,
70s. But it only goes up like to the first couple of albums. But
okay.
there's a
I
lot of
can't wait to see it.
material. Yeah, a lot of material in there anyway.
Hmm.
But yeah, okay, well, that sounds good. And you've
Well,
enjoyed.
listen, it's been really good talking to you, man.
Well, same here. I mean, I always enjoy these. I I think maybe a little late in life I found my calling, which you might call that. But I think it feeds me. It
Good,
ministers to me. So, and I know I'm getting a lot of comments, positive feedback that it's worthwhile. It's definitely
great,
worthwhile.
great.
So
Well, I've really enjoyed it, and thank you so much for inviting me.
you're very welcome. You're very welcome, Bruce.
And
And go ahead.
yeah, well, look, I'll sign off, and thanks
Okay.
again. See you soon.
All right. And I will send you a copy of this probably next weekend.
We'll stay in touch.
All right. And
Brilliant.
all right. Thank you so much. All right.
Okay. All the
All
best.
right. All right. All the
Bye.
best.